You notice, what word have you not heard over the last 2 weeks? Affordability. Because I've won affordability.
My God, Jesus. He's the Zoran Mamdani of his generation, I guess. You're not hearing anything about affordability. Shut up, all you peasants that are still suffering. Shut up, all of you that can't afford food. You're not saying anything about it, and I'm certainly not hearing anything about it. Why? Because I won affordability. I won it. It was a fight. And I punched it in the face, and now there's no issues anymore. You haven't seen anything in the news about that because the job growth is terrible, wages aren't going up, inflation is terrible, but I won, just like the Nobel Prize. So anyway, we know that tonight Donald Trump plans to talk about the economy. He has to talk about the economy. He doesn't necessarily want to talk about the economy, at least the real one. He might talk about his fictional one that exists only within the confines of his skull. But I know that his aides are gonna put a bunch of stuff in the teleprompter for him to talk about. They're going to pretend that the American people didn't pay for the tariffs. They're gonna pretend that factories are moving back here. They're gonna pretend a whole bunch of stuff, or that we're respected abroad or whatever. The issue is that I don't think that message is gonna land, because it hasn't been for months. We've already tried this. But more importantly, Donald Trump is going to undercut it so goddamn much. My God, is he gonna undercut the message? He is gonna see the Supreme Court justices in front of him, and he's going to lose his mind all over them. He's gonna be saying insanely racist stuff. He's gonna be attacking Jasmine Crockett. You're not gonna win affordability in this speech when you go off on massive, crazy tangents, and you can expect that he is going to do that. You think that he's gonna see the Epstein survivors in that room with him, and he's gonna keep it together? I kind of doubt it. So anyway, what will be in the teleprompter that he might or might not get to? A couple of ideas, some of which don't even sound that bad. So for one, Trump is going to formally announce ratepayer protection pledges the administration negotiated with top tech companies that require tech companies to pay increased electricity costs in communities where new AI data centers are being built. That is a good idea. We did a video on it, which is on the channel that you can go look at. And in that video, you'll see me desperately wanting to give them credit for this, but then acknowledging that this is a massive ruse and a squirrel, and it's not actually going to happen. And it's not, by the way, Wall Street Journal. It doesn't require tech companies to do this. It is a voluntary agreement that they will pay it. And they will never ever pay anything that they're not legally required to. That's the obligation that they have to their shareholders. So this is a massive freaking lie. And Donald Trump and his administration have been lying about the fact that AI data centers being built jacks up the price of electricity in those communities. They say that it actually drives down the price. So why would they be requiring these companies to pay for something that isn't actually on them? I don't believe it at all. That said, in terms of PR, it's a good thing to say and then not do, because people do hate the data centers and they should. But that's not the only thing he's gonna talk about. He's also planning to call on Congress to pass legislation codifying his concepts of a healthcare plan, which is basically nothing. So that calls for redirecting federal subsidies from insurers to consumers. The basic idea being, why give the money to the companies when you can give it to the consumers to pay for their insurance? But bear in mind, this is the guy that was willing to shut down the government and keep it shut down. And according to the most recent analysis of GDP growth in Q4 of 2025, we lost 1% of GDP growth because of the government shutdown. And what was that government shutdown over? Him not wanting to give money to consumers to pay for their health insurance anymore. So you're gonna have to excuse me if I don't believe that that's a big priority for him when he was willing to wreck the US economy to stop providing subsidies for people to pay for their Medicare, of their Obamacare premium. So I don't believe that that is true. Now I know he is going to encourage them to really focus all of our healthcare attention on these health savings plans, because if you have a lot of money, they're pretty good and you should use them, and people using them will put money in the stock market, which is the only thing that him and his buddies actually care about. So it's good for rich people and it's good for investors who have stock in the companies that might get juiced a little bit through this. For regular people, putting $1,000 into one of these, if you could even afford it anyway with the little money left over after his tariffs, 7 years later is worth $2,000. Boy, I hope you don't have a particularly egregious toothache at that point, because it is not gonna cover any actual healthcare costs for a regular person or a regular family. It is a scam. And so he's gonna propose a few things that might sound like he's taking things seriously. I'm not too worried about it because I don't think he's gonna actually do that stuff. And I also think that people are gonna see through it because they don't trust him anymore. That said, you should know that as Donald Trump is making these promises tonight, and as he's saying insane conspiratorial things and likely telling lies about voter fraud and all that, the American people are desperately trying to get the message to him that they are not buying it, and they really can't afford to buy anything because of his terrible stewardship of the economy. And so regular working Americans have been being interviewed by the New York Times and talking about the fact that the economy is not working for them. One, Kristen Errico, a managing editor at a small publishing house in New York, wishes Mr. Trump would dispense with the "I've won" affordability rhetoric and use Tuesday's speech to explain in detail how he plans to address the cost of groceries, housing, and childcare. Everything is up 20% in cost, except my salary. Kristen, I feel terrible for the situation you're in, but the answer to your question is he is not going to address the cost except to lie to you that it's low. He'll say that, oh, did you hear gas just hit $1.99 again? But he cannot say we're gonna get the cost of groceries down because he's already telling you that they did. He can't acknowledge that it's a problem that needs to be solved because he can't acknowledge that it's a problem. And so that's kind of an issue. He doesn't want to get the cost of housing down. He already told you that. And Bessett told you the same thing. I think Lutnick told you the same thing, because they don't want the cost or the value of housing that people already buy to go down. They care more about the stakeholders who already own property and houses than they do about the people that are fearing at this point that they will never be able to. He's been very clear about that. She's not the only one that was interviewed though. Maribel McBeath said she missed the initial enrollment window for Medicare after she turned 65, but plans to enroll as soon as possible. Without insurance, she pays about $105 a month for medication, which is, by the way, much lower than for some people I've heard, but still very difficult. She says she doesn't own a car, so she generally depends on public buses and Ubers for transportation. It's a struggle every month. I pay my rent, and then I pay enough to keep the lights and water running. And that is a difficult position to be in. And it's yet another reminder, by the way, of how not having money can be an incredibly expensive thing. Using Ubers is not cheap. Being forced because you can't afford a car to use Ubers constantly very quickly can rise to the level of what you'd be paying on a car payment, except that you're not building any equity in a car. But that's the position that people get put into. I'm glad that in some places they have access to public buses. I wish that we'd invested far more in public transportation over the past couple of decades, but this is a very difficult position to be in. And some even middle class people are feeling the crunch more than in past years. Some have taken second and third jobs in recent years to stay afloat, inspiring the modern term polyworking. Polyworking, dear God. The number of people with multiple jobs in January was about 8.6 million, according to monthly figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which I'm sure they will greet as the American people's entrepreneurial spirit. Oh, they're hard workers. Yeah, but they shouldn't have to do that. They shouldn't have to do that to make a living, to be able to afford to pay for their home, to keep their family alive. And they should be spending time with their family. They should be reaping the rewards of their labor rather than just putting in more labor that doesn't benefit them, but does benefit the people who own the multiple corporations that they work for. This is a terrible state for the union to be in. We'll see if Donald Trump acknowledges literally any of it. I will not be holding my breath.